Hello and welcome to the Futures 3D video training series. My name is Jeff Christiana and this is a video number 8 of the ReplicatorG 34 video series on how to decipher the Machine.xml file. Now the Machine.xml file, as you can see here, that tells ReplicatorG how to connect to your TF3D printer. When you double click on this ReplicatorG and you connect, it needs to know your COM port rate, which is listed here, and by default you can have it pull specific COM port. It does remember the last COM port that you have selected with the ReplicatorG, so this is probably used just for one time. But the baud rate here, if you do change the baud rate in your firmware, you need to go into your Machine.xml file and change it here as well, or it will never connect. This file also tells you what driver you're using. The ramps with Marlin firmware, you need to have the RepRap 5D drivers, so that's a must. Let's see, this is your firmware URL location. This is the location where when you go to Machine and do your upload, new firmware, this is the directory that points to our servers over the internet. So under File, under Preferences, I know in the last video I've said to go in and check this. Sometimes this does not change the property setting. It's not 100%, so you could actually go into your Machine.xml file, copy this, and then paste it within your, under Advanced here, under Firmware Update URL. It must be here within ReplicatorG. At the top of the file, we see we're defining a machine. The name is TF3D Ramps Electronics with stepper extruder for 16 by 16. If you go back over to ReplicatorG, go to Machine, well, we have to disconnect before we can see that. We're going to disconnect, Machine, Machine Type. This is where it's coming from. TF3D Ramps Electronics with stepper extruder for 16 by 16. So when you select the profile name, that is where they're getting it from. The geometry type, Cartesian, this sets up your mechanics. What's your hardware like? What's your motors? What's your feed rate? What's your length? If you go into Control Panel, let me reconnect here, and we go to Control Panel. Okay. Let me click on the Control Panel button here, and we'll drag it down. Under Control Panel, your length 400, your Y 400, your Z 400 is actually telling the profile that you are a 16-inch by 16-inch by 11.5 for your plane, this blue gridded plane. Actually, I'll shut the Control Panel down for right now. I'm going to scroll out. That is telling it what this box is. These settings here tell it this box. So that's what those do. Without these settings, this box would not be what, the right dimensions. So each one of those profiles have a different number here. Now we go into Control Panel. Under Control Panel, the max feed rate, this is where this number comes from, this 5,000, it comes from this. Now I've played with numbers, and 5,000 seems to be the best setting, as well as the Z-axis. 160 is the best setting for speed. So that's what sets your max motor speeds, and the actual setting is in your firmware. This here is just information that plugs into your Control Panel, where I'm going to show you in your firmware where you're going to make that change if you want to have faster speeds, or just increase your extruder or your motor type. So your steppers per minute, this is no longer looked at. This is legacy data. You do this in firmware now, so I would ignore that. and your end stops equal minimum. This is also legacy. I have left these in here just for information, but when we go to home X, it looks to say, okay, where's your end stops? Oh, they're at minimum. So that's where you want to home. And I'll show you in the firmware where that's defined as well. So that's what that is. Your tool down here, it describes your tool head. We're telling it it's a stepper motor. We're telling it a motor. A lot of the things in here are turned off. I've never ever had to use any of these. Mist coolant, flood coolant, I don't even know what those would be used for. The fan is obvious. That's going to turn it on, allow you to use the fan option within your G code or your control panel. Valve, I don't know what that is. Collet, I don't know. Let's see. Heater is true, so that gives you, when heater is true, heated build platform is true, you get this to appear. These get to appear. So if I went in here and said heated build platform false, this would disappear. Platform target would completely disappear. If I had two extruders, I would define another motor. Right now we're defining a stepper axis A. I would define a stepper axis B, and that would, another line will appear here for a second tool head. And we'll get into that more when we do dual extrusion. Motor steps 1800 fits our motor type, and default RPM 100. Now this one here used to populate the motor speed, but it doesn't anymore, so I'm not sure why that's not working anymore. But if you want to, we'll talk about this in the control panel, but you can type in 100 and do your tests. So we talked about the actual geometry, the geometry of the machine. We talked about the tools. We talked about the firmware, and this is a help guide, the Futures 3D guide URL. This just takes you to the reprap.org ReplicatorG site. We talked about the drivers. This is all COM port, and down below here they inject some noise to keep the retransmits and recovery. Supposedly that helps the connection. I'll have to get into this a little bit more later. But I've left the defaults of what others have done to for that setting. And you're talking about your data bits, stop bits. That's standard COM port settings, 8 none 1 type. And then you end the driver, and then they begin there's also a place here for warm-up, which is not being used, cooldown, and I don't really use any of this because we actually do a cooldown within our n.g code. You can take your n.g code and you can set it to where the temperature slowly comes down. You can set your temperature to be, let's say you want your bed to go from 75 degrees to 60. Put a timer in there for a minute or two, and then make another command and go from 60 to 50, and then a timer, and then you just keep working your way down until it's finally down to 0. So you can completely control how your heated build platform slowly cools down. I have not needed to do that, so just something that might interest you if you want to pursue that. So that's pretty much the Machine.xml file. Let me show you where that's located. ReplicatorG 0034. And we'll open it up. Machine. And there you go. Replicate riprap for 12, 14, and 16. You open up 16. And here you are. You can also go to ReplicatorG, machine information. That will give you the same thing. You cannot edit in here, just information, so you can go here and review depending on the profile you've pulled up. So, alright, well, we'll see you in the next video where we're going to hit that control panel hard and real-time controls. We'll see you then.